a number of important factors to keep in mind when conducting an internal investigation in an authorised firm in the financial services sector. Getting these things right matters in terms of ensuring you comply with your regulatory obligations and mitigating the risk of the regulator intervening and commencing its own investigation. The PRA and FCA recognise that there are good reasons for firms to carry out their own investigations. Firms need to know the extent of any problem and determine what immediate or short-term measures they should take to mitigate or correct any problems. And taking a proactive approach is important in demonstrating accountability. Sharing the outcome of an investigation with regulators can potentially save time and resources for both parties. This doesn't mean firms are obliged to share legally privileged reports, but where a firm does volunteer the results of its investigation, this may be taken into account by regulators when deciding what action to take, if any.
There may be circumstances where the firm wishes to share the output of its investigation with its regulators. In some situations, this can be beneficial and therefore advisable. For example, where the underlying issue is or could be a material regulatory concern, or where the regulators have already indicated that an issue may result in enforcement action. Where a firm does decide to do so, it will be important to engage with the regulators at an early stage in the process. This will include discussing with them the scope of the investigation and the governance around it. Firms should tread carefully and should be alive to the possibility that their own internal investigation could be prejudicial to a subsequent investigation by the regulators. This would be a particular concern where there is potential criminal conduct. In such circumstances, advice should be sought early on and discussions should be had with the regulators where appropriate. It may, for example, be the case that the regulators do not want the firm to carry out its own internal investigation because of the risk that doing so could alert those under investigation. In other situations, the regulators may be very keen for the firm to carry out its own investigation first, and assuming that the investigation is thorough and can be shown to be thorough, this may reduce the regulator's appetite to carry out an investigation of their own.
At the outset, it will be important to determine whether any self-reporting obligations arise. There has been a rising trend of enforcement actions based on Principle 11, so firms need to be open and transparent and tell regulators what they would expect to know. There are also many specific rule requirements on self-reporting certain types of matters, so firms need to ensure they understand these and comply. Don't delay too long. Most reporting obligations are pretty immediate, so speak to the regulators before making any significant commitments. A number of the notification rules require an assessment of significance or to determine how likely something is to happen. Remember, just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it doesn't need to be reported. If you get this right at the start, it can build trust and confidence in the regulatory relationship, which should help you to contain matters, self-investigate, and avoid regulatory action.
At the start and throughout the investigation, the firm will need to keep under consideration whether any issues arise in relation to the fitness and propriety of senior managers and certified persons, and whether there are any breaches of the individual conduct rules. The regulators are likely to want to know if the investigation report will describe the role and responsibilities of identified individuals, and whether the investigation will be limited to ascertaining facts or will also include advice or opinions about breaches of regulatory rules and requirements. This includes consideration of individual accountability. The regulators will expect the firm to consider any failings or misconduct by individuals and who should be held directly or indirectly accountable for what has happened. The firm may also have regard to conduct outside the workplace in the case of assessing fitness and propriety. Each case will need to be considered on its own facts, together with any mitigating circumstances, but the firm should aim for consistency in its approach to the review in accordance with the firm's own policies and standards and the latest guidance from the firm's regulators.
A firm must notify its regulators where there is a significant breach of the conduct rules, for example, something that impacts the firm's systems and controls or has consequences for the firm or its customers. Notification obligations are also triggered where disciplinary action is taken because of a breach of the conduct rules. If a senior manager ceases to perform their designated function, a firm must submit a Form C and must tell the regulator without delay if the Form C will be qualified. For example, if the senior manager is dismissed or is suspended or resigns pending investigation or some other issue impacting their fitness and properness. The Form C will need to include a narrative explaining the circumstances, and this could be very sensitive and must be handled with care. If the firm becomes aware of information which would be material to the assessment of fitness and properness of a senior manager, they must submit a Form D, again without delay. This could, for example, arise in a situation where the senior manager has been subject to disciplinary proceedings because of conduct at work or because of something that has happened in their private life. Lastly, for the purpose of regulatory references, the firm must retain records of disciplinary and fit and proper findings going back at least 6 years, longer for very serious misconduct. And the firm must update or revise these regulatory references given in the last 6 years if new information comes to light.
You need to think through all these issues at the start and throughout to maintain a good, constructive dialogue with the regulators. Keep under review any information provided to the regulators that might need to be corrected or updated as matters develop, including any further issues that might need to be self-reported. Show that lessons have been learned and acted on by the firm. Don't wait until the end of the investigation to put things right. The best way to avoid regulatory intervention is for the firm to give confidence and assurance that it's taking the matter seriously and is committed to taking timely and effective corrective action.